Welcome everybody. We got another short video today talking about why you should skip the desert squares, and we'll get into what we mean by that. But what prompted this conversation is I was hanging out a couple weeks ago with a few land guys who've been in the business a long time, one in particular much longer than me, and he was talking about how high his default rates were when he was selling on terms. And we got into it, and this was going back to years ago. He had been taught the desert square model, where you buy just the totally middle of nowhere, a lot of times no road, no access desert squares, and resell them on terms. And that caused him a huge amount of headache. Of course, he doesn't do it anymore, but that's what a lot of the courses are teaching. And so we wanted to talk about why you shouldn't start there, basically.
Yeah. And I think that if you've been in the business at all, you'll recognize some of the areas and counties that a lot of people really start this model. The Costilla County, Colorado, the Mojave County, Arizona, different parts of West Texas. And it's a really attractive place for people to get started, because one of the things that appealed to me about land investing versus flipping houses or anything like that was that lower cost to get into the game. And whenever you hear people saying, oh, you can buy a lot for $100 and sell it for $2,000, I mean, that's an insane return on your investment. But what we're going to talk about here is a lot of the negative aspects of it, of why we feel that it's actually kind of a crappy way to do business and bordering, honestly, on unethical, I think.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to people buying these parcels thinking they can do something with them when they cannot. And that is really the crux of it. There's plenty of desert square lots that are useful. All the Pueblo West lots have sold. People build houses on them, and they can build houses on them, so that's fine. So what we really mean is selling a parcel that cannot be used as the buyer thinks it can be used.
Yeah. So there are the desert squares out there. Pueblo West is not desert squares, Dan.
It is a desert, and they're square. So
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
yeah,
Okay, you're correct. But
yeah.
I do feel like what we're not talking about here is, like, if there's actually access and you're allowed to camp on the land and you're able to buy the American dream for $50 a month or something like that, that's totally okay. I think it's whenever people start selling a dream that's not actually what we're talking about. You're not able to use the land in what its intended use is. Um, that's that's what we're talking about. So we're going to start with a market that's pretty close to both of us, that Dan and I both have a good amount of familiarity with, which is Colorado City, Colorado.
Yeah. So I distinctly remember this from when I first got started mailing and calling down here. And if you go just east of I-25 and you zoom in a little bit, you'll see all those platted lots. And I have driven through there. And you better get out your 4x4, because those roads were graded in the 60s. They've never been touched since, totally undeveloped. And you cannot legally camp on those lots. So these, for all intents and purposes, are worthless, and you can't use them for anything. So this is an example of what we're talking about. Yeah, those are just rough graded paths from a very long time ago. Lots of arroyos and bumps and dips. So you can't do anything with that land. I would discourage anyone from selling this sort of land. Any
Well,
thoughts, Mason?
and you're absolutely right. And I think what's interesting too is that if you don't look at the satellite imagery, which a lot of people will just look at the plat map, on the GIS and not actually look at the satellite, or they won't look at Google Street View whenever it's available. Because if you look at it before you put on the satellite imagery, it looks like a fully developed subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
You go over here, it looks like you have all these golf course lots. And there are some places where there are roads cut in, but there's no utilities at all. And I think what's interesting is whenever you're looking at the owners, there's a lot of different owners on these parcels, where a lot of people will have bought it as a speculative investment, or potentially they were swindled in the 70s or 80s or 90s. There's places like in Crestone, Colorado, for instance, where we've done deals with people that lived in Guam and the Philippines whenever they bought it, and they were sold on this idea of buying this Rocky Mountain land, where potentially the developer, had initial plans to do something, and that just never really panned out. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
uh, a few of the negative reasons, that we have mentioned, but haven't really spent much time on is just the method and mechanism of actually purchasing land like this. Dan, have you ever bought a desert square?
Yeah, when I started, I can tell you the story is I remember buying one like that in Colorado City, and the guy who bought it from me, I met him on Craigslist. We went down there, we drove it together. So I don't feel bad about this. He knew exactly what it was, and he goes, there's a chance this gets developed in my grandkids' lifetime. I'll just will it to them." And he bought it for me for $700. I bought it for $100. So I did a few of them. Yeah.
Do you use a title company?
No, I think we could have, but I didn't. I'm not sure.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons of I really recommend using a title
Yeah.
company. It becomes harder to justify whenever the properties that you're purchasing are only a few $100. Then title policy is,
Hmm.
10x the actual cost of what the uh, what the land is going to be. But that right there is an additional risk related
Yeah.
to it. If you could buy a piece of dirt that is not actually theirs to sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Additionally, like with our disposition strategies that we use realtors primarily, or I sell it myself now that I'm a realtor as well. Realtors most likely won't touch it. On this, actually, I got a lead for 80 Colorado City lots that someone's trying to sell, and I'm kind of just kicking the can down the road because I don't want to do it. It's a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of work to make almost no money at all. Whenever there's greater opportunities out there. Not that you shouldn't take the small ones, which we talk about a lot of taking the small opportunities, but it reaches a point where you end up losing money doing deals like this.
Yeah, and those will sit forever. So one more thing is just going back to the story I told in the intro, talking to a friend. I've sold dozens of lots on terms. I've never had someone default. I think you've had like one person, Mason.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're selling this crap, you're going to have lots and lots of defaults. So even ignoring any sort of ethical reasons not to do it, it's just a crappy business. I would make sure you're targeting useful land that can actually be used for the intended use. If you could camp on those Colorado City lots and you wanted to sell them for camping, great, but you can't, not legally at least. So, yeah, don't sell worthless land.
Well, and I think it beyond just the gravitation that all the newbies feel towards this space within the business, it also means there's more competition.
Yeah.
Where if you don't really know what you're doing and you don't really understand this product fully, you might end up overpaying for it. Because if you
Hmm.
go pay $1,000 for the lot and get $1,000 title insurance policy, and you can only sell it for $1,500, and then you have the closing costs on the back end and potentially everything else, you end up really, really losing money. And I think, beyond just saying negative things, where there's a ton of people that have had a tremendous amount of success doing this business and starting the model out this way. I think if you don't have the money to spend a tremendous amount on marketing and everything, go for the wholesale route. Go make $1,000 or $2,000 assigning a few contracts. Start stacking your capital so you can create a flip model that's really, really beneficial. Because what ends up happening, you do enough deals, you end up buying some really prime pieces of land for $500 or $1,000 that you can go sell for 10 grand. And those are always wins. But with these ones right here, with no development potential, you're not actually able to use them for their intended use. You're going to end up losing, I think, in the long run.
Yeah. One more highlight before we close. I just want to double down on the idea of buying any real estate without getting title insurance is crazy, and reselling it without title insurance to someone who actually wants to use it. I highly discourage anyone from doing that. I can't tell you how many properties we thought were just fine, and there's some weird break in the title or lien or something. I think that's just foolish, and again, just opens you up to liability down the road, even from a purely selfish perspective. You're going to get yourself in trouble doing that. I would not do that.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you guys for watching this video. We're going to keep these coming. If you have any suggestions of types of videos that you want to see, from land flipping to rental properties to becoming a realtor, just let us know in the comments or reach out to us. We appreciate you guys tuning in.